The assignment notice appeared on Marcus Chin's neural implant at exactly 0600 hours, just as he finished his morning protein synthesis in his cramped quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel Concordia. The message was brief, clinical, and devastating to his carefully planned career trajectory. Diplomatic Corps Assignment 7749 Delta. Cultural Liaison Position, Princess Zarathak of House Velnari, Kepler, 442b. Duration, indefinite. Transport departs 0800 hours. Marcus nearly choked on his synthetic coffee. Princess Zarathak. Every being in the known galaxy had heard whispers about the Barren princess of the mighty Velnari Empire. She was the genetic dead end of one of the most powerful alien dynasties, cursed by their gods with an inability to reproduce. In a culture where fertility determined political power and social standing, she was essentially a living ghost. The other diplomats in the mess hall were already snickering. Ambassador Reeves, a pompous centurion with 6 arms and an ego to match, gestured dramatically with all of them as he spoke. "Poor Marcus," Reeves said loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "Sent to babysit the galaxy's most useless princess. I hear she hasn't left her palace in 3 standard years. What exactly does Earth expect you to accomplish with someone who can't even fulfill her basic biological function?" Laughter rippled through the room. Even the usually professional Andromedan attaches were struggling to contain their amusement. Marcus felt his face burn with embarrassment and anger, but he kept his expression neutral. He learned long ago that showing emotion only encouraged these alien bullies. "Maybe she needs someone to teach her human mating rituals," called out Deputy Minister Klextar, his mandibles clicking with cruel amusement. "I hear humans breed like parasites. Perhaps some of that fertility will rub off on her." More laughter. Marcus stood up, gathered his belongings, and walked out without a word. Behind him, he heard Ambassador Reeves' stage whisper, "There goes the most promising human diplomatic career, straight into the trash compactor of galactic politics." 2 hours later, Marcus found himself aboard a small, elegant transport vessel that screamed money and power. The Velnari Empire might consider Princess Zarathak a failure, but they still maintained appearances. The ship was crewed entirely by humans, which surprised him until he realized the probable reason. Most alien species would consider serving the Barren Princess a career-ending assignment. Humans, being relatively new to galactic politics, were expendable. Captain Sarah Okafor, a weathered woman with kind eyes, briefed him during the 3-day journey to Kepler, 442b. "You need to understand something about Princess Zarathak," she said as they sat in the observation lounge, watching hyperspace blur past the windows. "The media portrays her as this pathetic, broken creature, but I've been transporting supplies to her world for 2 years now. There's more to her than anyone realizes." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "She's brilliant. I mean genuinely, terrifyingly intelligent. She holds advanced degrees in xenobiology, quantum mechanics, and something called dimensional resonance theory that I can't even pretend to understand. The problem is, in Velnari culture, none of that matters if you can't produce offspring." Marcus nodded. He'd done his research during the journey. The Velnari were an ancient species that had built their empire on genetic superiority and careful breeding programs. They believed that the ability to reproduce was a direct gift from their gods, and those who couldn't were considered spiritually tainted. "Why do you think they assigned a human to her?" Marcus asked. Captain Okafor shrugged. "Maybe because we don't share their cultural biases. Or maybe because they figure if this assignment destroys your career, it's no great loss to the galactic community." The planet Kepler, 442b, was as desolate as its reputation suggested. From orbit, it looked like a giant marble of brown and gray, with only small patches of sickly green vegetation scattered across its surface. The princess had been exiled here 3 years ago after her 3rd failed fertility treatment. According to the files, the atmosphere was breathable, but the soil was largely barren, contaminated by some ancient industrial disaster that had occurred centuries before the Velnari claimed the world. The princess's palace was a sprawling complex of white stone and crystal that seemed almost to glow against the drab landscape. As their shuttle approached, Marcus could see vast, empty gardens that must have once been beautiful, but now contained only dead soil and the skeletal remains of exotic plants. Princess Zarathak herself met them at the landing platform, which was unprecedented according to royal protocol. She should have remained in her throne room and made him come to her. Instead, she stood in the pale morning light, tall and elegant despite her supposed disgrace. The Velnari were a beautiful species by most standards. They looked almost human, but taller and more graceful, with subtle chitinous plates along their arms and faces that caught and reflected light. Their hair grew in elaborate natural patterns that changed color with their emotions. Princess Zarathak's hair was currently a deep blue-black, which Marcus's research told him indicated sadness or resignation. "You must be Marcus Chun," she said as he approached. Her voice was musical, with the slight harmonic undertones that made Velnari speech so distinctive. "I admit, I was surprised when they told me Earth was sending a cultural liaison. Usually, they just send a medical monitor to make sure I don't die and embarrass the Empire." "Your Highness," Marcus said, offering the formal bow that protocol required. "I'm honored to serve." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Honored? Young man, you've been assigned to the galactic equivalent of a leper colony. There's no honor here, only exile." As she led him into the palace, Marcus was struck by how empty it felt. The corridors were vast and beautiful, decorated with priceless artwork and exotic materials from across the galaxy, but they echoed with emptiness. He saw only a handful of servants, all of them keeping their distance from their mistress. "How many people live here?" he asked. "Myself, 12 servants, and now you," she replied. "Quite a change from the imperial capital, where I once commanded a household of 3,000. She showed him to his quarters, which were more luxurious than anywhere he'd ever stayed. The room overlooked one of the dead gardens, and he could see for kilometers across the barren landscape. "Princess," he said carefully, "may I ask what you'd like me to do here?" My orders were somewhat vague. She turned to look at him, and he was struck by her eyes. They were large and golden, with the vertical pupils characteristic of her species, but there was an intelligence in them that seemed to pierce right through him. "Do you know why they really sent you here, Marcus Chen?" she asked. "I assumed it was for cultural exchange and diplomatic relations." "No," she said softly. "They sent you here to watch me die. You're not a cultural liaison. You're a witness. When the last princess of House Velnari finally succumbs to despair and ends her own life, they want a human there to testify that the Empire treated me with all appropriate dignity." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Your Highness, I don't think what? That they would be so callous." Her hair began to shift color, taking on reddish highlights that indicated anger. "Marcus, I am the genetic dead end of a bloodline that has ruled for 10,000 years. My inability to reproduce is seen as a curse on the entire royal family. They can't kill me outright, because that would be regicide, but they can certainly arrange for me to remove myself from the equation." She walked to the window and stared out at the wasteland beyond. "For 3 years, I've been trapped here with nothing but my research and my books. Do you know what it's like to be the smartest person on a planet and have no one to share your discoveries with? Do you know what it's like to solve problems that could benefit millions of people, only to have your solutions dismissed because they came from a defective mind?" Marcus joined her at the window. "What kind of research?" She glanced at him sidelong. "You really want to know?" "Yes. Come with me." She led him through a maze of corridors to a section of the palace he hadn't seen before. Here, the decorative elements gave way to functional architecture. They passed through multiple security checkpoints, each one scanning both of them with sophisticated sensors. Finally, they emerged into a vast laboratory that took Marcus's breath away. The space was filled with equipment he couldn't even begin to identify, screens displaying complex equations and molecular diagrams, and what appeared to be several experimental setups in various stages of completion. "This is where I've been spending my time," Princess Zarathax said, "working on a little problem that's been nagging at me." "What problem?" She gestured to one of the screens, which showed a detailed analysis of soil composition. "This planet wasn't always barren, Marcus. 500 years ago, it was a garden world. The Velnari historical records claim it was destroyed by an industrial accident, but that never made sense to me. Industrial accidents don't create the kind of contamination we see here." Marcus studied the data, trying to make sense of the complex chemical breakdowns and isotope analyses. "I spent my first year here just analyzing soil samples," she continued. "What I found was fascinating. The contamination isn't industrial at all. It's biological. Something was introduced to this planet that systematically destroyed its ability to support most forms of plant life." "Introduced by whom? That's the question, isn't it?" Her eyes gleamed with intellectual excitement. "But I think I'm close to an answer. And, more importantly, I think I'm close to a solution." She led him to another section of the lab, where dozens of small planters contained what appeared to be healthy, growing plants. "These are native species from this planet," she said proudly. "I've managed to create a bacterial treatment that neutralizes the contamination and restores the soil's fertility. In small-scale tests, I've achieved a 97% success rate." Marcus stared at the thriving plants. If what she was saying was true, this was a breakthrough that could restore an entire world. "Princess, this is incredible. Have you reported this to the Imperial Science Council?" Her expression darkened. "I tried. They refused to review any research coming from the Barren Princess. They said my genetic deficiency made me unreliable for scientific work." Marcus felt a surge of anger on her behalf. "That's ridiculous. Your fertility has nothing to do with your intelligence. Try telling that to the Empire," she said bitterly. "In their eyes, I'm fundamentally broken. Nothing I accomplish matters because I can't fulfill my basic biological function." They spent the rest of the day touring her laboratory and discussing her research. Marcus was amazed by the scope and sophistication of her work. She wasn't just working on soil restoration. She had projects involving atmospheric processing, quantum communication, and something she called dimensional field manipulation that was completely beyond his understanding. As the day wore on, he began to understand why they'd really sent him here. Princess Zarathax wasn't just intelligent. She was a genius whose potential was being wasted because of a biological quirk that had nothing to do with her value as a person or a scientist. That evening, they dined together in a small, informal dining room rather than the vast formal hall that would have emphasized how alone she was. The food was excellent, prepared by one of the few servants who had chosen to follow her into exile. "Marcus," she said as they finished their meal, "may I ask you something personal?" "Of course, Your Highness. Please just call me Zara. We're going to be stuck together for quite some time, and formality gets tiresome." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "What do you think of me?" "Honestly," Marcus considered his words carefully, "I think you're one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. I think your exile is a tremendous waste of potential, and I think the Empire's treatment of you is both cruel and stupid." She smiled for the first time since he'd met her, and her hair shifted to a warm golden color. "Thank you for that. It's been a long time since anyone looked at me and saw something other than failure." "If I may ask," Marcus said carefully, "have you considered trying to leave? Going somewhere else where your work would be appreciated?" "Where would I go?" she asked. "I'm the royal princess of the Velnari Empire. There's nowhere in the galaxy I could hide where they wouldn't find me. And besides, this is my home. My ancestors built this empire. Why should I be the one to leave?" Marcus nodded, understanding her position, but frustrated by the unfairness of it all. "What about you?" she asked. "What brings a promising young diplomat to the edge of nowhere?" Marcus told her about his career, his hopes for advancement, and the humiliation of being assigned to what everyone considered a dead-end posting. "We're quite a pair," Zara said when he finished. "The Barren Princess and the failed diplomat. I prefer to think of us as the brilliant scientist and Her research assistant, Marcus replied. She laughed, a real laugh this time. Research assistant? You know nothing about xenobiology or quantum mechanics. Then, teach me. She looked at him seriously. You really mean that, don't you? Yes. If I'm going to be here for an indefinite period, I might as well make myself useful. And, frankly, your work is far more interesting than anything I was doing on the diplomatic circuit. Zara stood and walked to the window, where the planet's 3 moons were rising over the barren landscape. Marcus, she said softly, do you believe in destiny? I'm not sure. Why? Because I have a feeling that your assignment here wasn't the accident that everyone thinks it was. I think the universe has a way of putting the right people in the right place at the right time. She turned back to him, and he could see a new determination in her golden eyes. I have a proposition for you. Help me complete my research. Help me prove that this world can be restored. Help me show the galaxy that the Barren Princess is capable of accomplishing something truly extraordinary. And then what? Then we change everything. Marcus felt a thrill of excitement and possibility. For the first time since receiving his assignment, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. When do we start? Zara smiled, and her hair blazed with streaks of silver and gold that he'd never seen before. We already have. Outside, the 3 moons cast their pale light over the dead gardens and barren hills. But in the palace laboratory, 2 unlikely allies were beginning to plan something that would shake the foundations of an empire and prove that sometimes the most discarded people are capable of the most extraordinary things. Marcus Chun had come to this planet expecting to witness a princess's decline into despair. Instead, he was about to help her rise to greatness. Neither of them knew it yet, but their partnership would become legendary across the galaxy, inspiring a revolution in how entire civilizations viewed worth, potential, and the true meaning of power. The galaxy had laughed at the human assigned to the Barren Princess. Soon, it would learn that the greatest mistake is underestimating those you've written off as failures. Sometimes the most unlikely people, in the most impossible circumstances, can accomplish the most extraordinary things. And sometimes, changing the world begins with simply believing that it can be done 6 months into his assignment. Marcus had become something he'd never expected, a scientist. Every morning began at dawn in Princess Zara's laboratory, where she patiently taught him the fundamentals of xenobiology, quantum mechanics, and dimensional field theory. His diplomatic training, it turned out, was excellent preparation for understanding complex alien concepts and translating between different ways of thinking. The contamination isn't random, Zara explained as they stood before a massive holographic display showing the planet's geological structure. Look at the pattern distribution. Marcus studied the 3-dimensional map, noting how the contamination seemed to follow specific lines across the planet's surface. It looks almost like a network. Exactly. Zara's hair flashed with excited golden highlights. This wasn't an industrial accident. This was deliberate biological warfare. Someone wanted to render this planet uninhabitable. Over the past months, Marcus had learned to read Zara's emotional states through her hair color changes. Right now, she was excited but also deeply angry. Her research had uncovered what appeared to be evidence of a massive cover-up spanning centuries. But who would do this? Marcus asked. And why? Zara manipulated the hologram, zooming in on specific areas. This planet was originally inhabited by the Kethmori, a peaceful species known for their agricultural innovations. They had developed farming techniques that could feed entire star systems. 500 years ago, they were at the height of their power, supplying food to half the galaxy. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. The Velnari Empire was expanding around that time. Food-producing worlds would have been valuable conquests. More than valuable, Zara said grimly. Essential. But the Kethmori refused to be conquered. They were pacifists, but they were also strategically brilliant. They formed alliances, created trade agreements, and made themselves so economically important that attacking them would have destabilized the entire galactic economy. She brought up historical records, showing the complex web of relationships the Keth Mori had built. So instead of direct conquest, someone decided to destroy their ability to produce food, Marcus said, understanding the horrible logic. The biological weapon was elegant in its simplicity, Zara continued. It didn't kill the Keth Mori directly. It just made their planet incapable of supporting agriculture. Within 50 years, they had no choice but to abandon their world and accept vassalage to whoever would feed them. Marcus stared at the evidence before him. Zara, if this is true, it means your empire committed genocide. Not genocide, she corrected. Something worse. Cultural destruction. They turned a proud, independent species into eternal refugees dependent on others for survival. The Keth Mori still exist, scattered across 100 worlds, but they're servants and laborers now. Their civilization was completely destroyed. She turned away from the display, her hair shifting to the deep blue-black of profound sadness. And the truly horrible part is that my family profited from it. When the Keth Mori could no longer supply food to their allies, those worlds became dependent on Velnari agricultural products. It was one of the foundations of our empire's economic power. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. Zara, you weren't responsible for this. It happened 500 years ago. But I benefit from it every day, she replied. My palace, my education, my life of luxury, all built on the systematic destruction of an entire civilization. They stood in silence for several minutes, absorbing the weight of what they discovered. Finally, Marcus spoke. What do we do about it? Zara turned back to him, and he saw that her sadness had transformed into steely determination. We fix it. We restore this world. And we do it in a way that exposes the truth about what happened here. Over the following weeks, they threw themselves into perfecting the soil restoration process. Zara's bacterial treatment was effective, but it needed to be scalable to planetary proportions. They worked 18-hour days, testing different application methods and refining the bacterial cultures. Marcus found himself becoming genuinely passionate about the work. His diplomatic skills proved surprisingly useful in thinking through the logistics of planetary restoration. How do you distribute treatment across billions of acres? How do you ensure the process doesn't damage existing ecosystems? How do you manage the political implications of what they were doing? We need to document everything, Marcus said as they worked late one evening. Not just the scientific process, but the historical evidence. When we reveal what we've accomplished, people need to understand the full context. Zara looked up from a bacterial culture she was examining. You really think anyone will care? I'm still the Barren princess. Even if I cure this entire world, they'll find ways to dismiss it. Then, we make it impossible to dismiss, Marcus replied. We don't just restore the soil. We invite observers. We livestream the process. We make it so public and so well documented that they can't pretend it didn't happen. The Empire will try to stop us. Let them try. By the time they realize what we're doing, it'll be too late. Their first major breakthrough came 8 months into the project. They had successfully treated a 100-acre test site and were seeing incredible results. Native plants were growing again, the soil chemistry was normalizing, and the area was showing signs of developing a healthy ecosystem. It's working, Zara breathed as they stood in the middle of what had been barren wasteland just 6 months earlier. Now it was covered with native grasses and small flowering plants. Insects buzzed through the air, and they could see small animals beginning to return to the area. Marcus pulled out his portable recorder and began documenting the scene. Date: Standard March 15th, 2387. Location: Test Site Alpha, Planet Kepler, 442b. Dr. Zarathak's soil restoration process has achieved full success in large-scale application. Previously barren land is now supporting native flora and beginning to develop a stable ecosystem. Dr. Zarathak, she asked with amusement. You have 3 advanced degrees, Marcus pointed out. You deserve the title more than half the people who use it. That evening, they celebrated with a bottle of wine that Zara had been saving for a special occasion. As they sat in her private garden, one of the few areas where she had managed to coax a few plants to grow using imported soil, Marcus felt a strange sense of contentment. "Marcus," Zara said as they watched the three moons rise, "can I tell you something?" "Of course. When I was first exiled here, I used to spend hours planning my own death. I had it all worked out, how I would do it, what message I would leave, how to make it look like an accident so my family wouldn't be embarrassed by suicide." Marcus felt his chest tighten with sadness and anger at the pain she had endured. "I thought that would be my legacy," she continued. "The Barren princess who couldn't even manage to live a useful life. But now," she gestured at their surroundings, at the evidence of their work. "Now I think I might actually accomplish something worth remembering." "You already have," Marcus said firmly. "What we've done here is going to change how people think about planetary restoration, about biological warfare, about the possibility of redemption for damaged worlds." She repeated softly. "You know, before you came here, I hadn't had a real conversation with another person in months. I'd forgotten what it was like to have someone believe in my work." Marcus looked at her, sitting in the moonlight with her golden eyes reflecting the silver light, her hair now a warm amber color that indicated contentment and hope. Over the past months, he'd come to realize that his feelings for her had grown far beyond professional respect or friendship. "Zara," he said carefully, "there's something I need to tell you." She turned to him with a questioning look. "I've fallen in love with you." For a moment, she didn't respond. Her hair shifted through several colors rapidly. Surprise, confusion, something that might have been fear, and, finally, settling on a soft rose gold that he'd never seen before. "Marcus, you know I can't. I'm genetically incapable of." "I don't care about any of that," he interrupted. "I'm not in love with your reproductive system. I'm in love with your brilliant mind, your incredible determination, your kindness, your passion for justice. I'm in love with the person who looked at a dead world and saw the possibility for life." Tears began to flow down her cheeks, but her hair remained that soft rose gold color. "Do you know what that color means?" she asked, gesturing to her hair. "I haven't seen it before. It's the color of being cherished, of being loved for who you are rather than what you can provide." She wiped her tears. "I haven't felt that since I was a child." She reached out and took his hand. "I love you too, Marcus Chun. I think I started falling for you the first day when you looked at my research and saw possibilities instead of the ravings of a defective princess." They sat together in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching the moons move across the star-filled sky. In the distance, they could see the lights of their laboratory, where their life's work waited to be completed. "What happens when we succeed?" Zara asked eventually. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "The Empire isn't going to be happy about having their historical crimes exposed. There will probably be political consequences." "Are you prepared for that?" Marcus thought about his diplomatic career, his carefully planned future, all the things he'd thought he wanted when he first arrived on this planet. "Yes," he said. "Whatever happens, it's worth it. You're worth it. This work is worth it." The next morning, they began preparing for the full planetary restoration. It would take months to manufacture enough bacterial cultures to treat the entire world, and they would need to develop deployment systems capable of covering vast areas efficiently. But they also began reaching out to allies. Marcus used his diplomatic contacts to quietly spread word about their work, building interest among scientists, journalists, and political figures who might support them when they went public. Zara reached out to scattered Kethmori communities across the galaxy, sharing their research and asking for their input. The response was overwhelming. Many Kethmori had preserved agricultural knowledge from their homeworld, and they were eager to help restore what had been stolen from them. "We're not just restoring a planet," Zara said as they read through messages of support from dozens of worlds. "We're potentially restoring an entire civilization." 3 months later, they were ready for the first large-scale deployment. They had refined their bacterial cultures, developed efficient distribution systems, and assembled a team of volunteer observers from multiple species to document the process. The night before they began, Marcus found Zara standing in her laboratory, staring out at the barren landscape that stretched to the horizon. "Second thoughts?" he asked. "No," she replied. "Just taking a moment to remember what this place looked like when we started. In a year, none of this will be recognizable." Marcus joined her at the window. "Do you think your family will try to stop us?" "Probably, but it's too late now. We've already shared our research with too many people. Even if they arrest us tomorrow, the work will continue." She turned to face him, her hair a determined silver white. "Marcus, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I've been thinking about for weeks." "What is it?" "When this is all over, when the world sees what we've accomplished, I want to renounce my title and my claim to the Velnari throne." Marcus stared at her in shock. "Zara, that's your heritage. Your birthright." "My birthright is built on genocide and lies," she replied. "I can't continue to benefit from what my ancestors did. And besides, I found something better than a throne." "What's that?" She smiled and took his hands. "A purpose, a partner, a chance to build something new instead of maintaining something corrupt." The next morning, they began the restoration of an entire world. As the first aircraft took off carrying their bacterial cultures, Marcus activated the recording equipment that would document every moment for history. "This is Marcus Chun, cultural liaison to Princess Zurathak of the Velnari Empire. Today we begin the restoration of Kepler 442b, also known as the former homeworld of the Kethmori people. What you are about to witness is not just the healing of a planet, but the revelation of a truth that has been hidden for 5 centuries." As he spoke, Zara worked alongside teams of Kethmori agricultural experts, human engineers, and scientists from a dozen different species. The Barren princess was barren no longer. She had become the leader of the most ambitious restoration project in galactic history. In the distance, ships were already appearing in orbit. Some brought supplies and additional volunteers. Others, Marcus knew, carried representatives of the Velnari Empire who had finally realized what was happening on this forgotten world. The galaxy had laughed at the human assigned to the Barren princess. Now, as the first restored areas began to bloom with new life, that laughter was turning to amazement. Princess Zarathak was proving that worth isn't measured in what you can produce for others, but in what you can create for the future. The transformation had begun, and there would be no stopping it now the Imperial fleet arrived 3 weeks into the planetary restoration process, just as the first green shoots were breaking through the soil across thousands of acres. Marcus watched from the palace's command center as 12 massive warships took position in orbit, their weapons trained on the planet's surface. "They're not here to congratulate us," Zara said grimly as she studied the tactical display. Her hair had shifted to deep red streaked with black, anger mixed with fear. Admiral Thekvar's face appeared on the main communication screen, his ceremonial battle armor gleaming and his expression coldly furious. Behind him, Marcus could see the bridge of an Imperial dreadnought. "Princess Zurathak," the Admiral said, his voice carrying the formal cadence of official Imperial business. "By order of the Velnari High Council, you are commanded to cease all unauthorized planetary modifications immediately and surrender yourself for transport back to the Imperial capital." Zara straightened, every inch the royal princess despite her exile. "Admiral Thekvar, I'm afraid I don't recognize the High Council's authority to interfere with legitimate scientific research conducted on my personal holding." The Admiral's mandibles clicked with irritation. "Your Highness, you are conducting unauthorized genetic modification on Imperial territory. Furthermore, you have been broadcasting seditious propaganda regarding historical Imperial policies. These actions constitute treason." Marcus stepped forward, moving to stand beside Zara. "Admiral, this is Marcus Chun, official diplomatic representative of Earth. I must inform you that this project has the backing of the Human Alliance, the Andromedan Federation, and 7 other major powers. Any military action against this planet would constitute an act of war against multiple sovereign governments." It was a bluff, of course. Earth government had no idea what was happening on Kepler 442b. But Marcus had learned enough about galactic politics to know that the Velnari Empire couldn't afford to alienate half the galaxy over one exiled princess. Admiral Thekvar's eyes narrowed. Mr. Chun, you are on Imperial territory and subject to Imperial law. Your presence here does not grant you any special protection. Actually, it does, came a new voice from the communication system. Another screen activated, showing Captain Sarah Okafor aboard her transport ship. Admiral, this is Captain Okafor of the independent vessel New Horizons. I have aboard my ship representatives from 17 different governments, all here as official observers of this restoration project. I also have full media coverage being broadcast live to over 300 worlds. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Captain Okafor had become an unofficial coordinator for their growing coalition of supporters. Over the past month, she had ferried journalists, scientists, and political figures from across the galaxy to witness what was happening on the planet. Furthermore, Captain Okafor continued, I have a priority message for Princess Zarathak from the Kethmori Assembly. A third screen activated, showing an elderly Kethmori with the distinctive silver skin and elaborate facial markings of their species. Marcus recognized him as Elder Corvesh, the elected leader of the scattered Kethmori communities. Princess Zarathak, Elder Corvesh said, his voice thick with emotion. On behalf of the Kethmori people, I formally request that you accept our application for citizenship on your world. We wish to return home, with your permission, to help complete the restoration of our ancestral planet. Zara's hair blazed with silver and gold, triumph mixed with joy. Elder Corvesh, it would be my honor to welcome the Kethmori home. Admiral Thekvar's face contorted with rage. This is absolutely unacceptable. Princess, you cannot grant citizenship rights without approval from the Imperial Council. This planet is Imperial territory. Actually, Admiral, you're wrong about that, Zara said calmly. She gestured to Marcus, who activated another holographic display showing legal documents. According to Imperial Charter 7734, any member of the royal family granted personal holding of a planet retains full sovereign authority over immigration and citizenship, Marcus read. This charter was signed by Emperor Velthak himself and has never been revoked. Zara had spent weeks researching obscure imperial laws with Marcus's help. They had known this confrontation was coming and prepared accordingly. Furthermore, Marcus continued, under Galactic Treaty 889, any planet's original indigenous inhabitants retain the right to reclaim their homeworld if they can demonstrate both historical claim and ability to maintain planetary stewardship. Admiral Thekvar was clearly struggling with the legal complexities. He was a military officer, not a lawyer, and the situation had moved far beyond simple imperial authority. Your Highness, he said finally, even if your legal position is technically correct, the High Council will never accept this situation. They will send the full Imperial fleet if necessary. Will they? Came another new voice. This screen showed Ambassador Reeves, the pompous Centaurian who had mocked Marcus months earlier on the diplomatic ship. But his expression now was entirely serious. Admiral Thekvar, this is Ambassador Reeves speaking on behalf of the Galactic Diplomatic Corps. I must inform you that formal diplomatic protests have already been filed by 12 major governments regarding the Empire's threat to use military force against a legitimate restoration project. Any attack on this planet would result in immediate economic sanctions and possible military intervention. Marcus stared at Reeves in amazement. The same alien who had laughed at his assignment was now defending their work. I don't understand, Admiral Thekvar said, clearly frustrated by the rapidly evolving situation. This is an internal Imperial matter. No, Admiral, it's not, said yet another voice. The screen showed Dr. Kelthra, a renowned xenobiologist from the University of New Geneva. What Princess Zarathak has accomplished here represents the greatest breakthrough in planetary restoration science in galactic history. Her bacterial treatment could potentially restore dozens of dead worlds across the galaxy. This isn't just about one planet. It's about the future of terraforming science. More screens activated as the communication system expanded to accommodate the growing number of participants. Scientists, politicians, journalists, and representatives from dozens of species all joined the conversation. What had started as a simple imperial arrest order had become a massive galactic conference. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Kelthra continued. "The restoration techniques developed here must be preserved and shared with the scientific community. Any attempt to suppress this research would be a crime against all sentient life." Marcus watched Zara as the support poured in from across the galaxy. Her hair was now a brilliant gold streaked with silver, and there were tears in her golden eyes. "Elder Corvesh," she said, addressing the Kethmori leader directly, "would you be willing to share with this assembly the true history of what happened to your people?" The elderly Kethmori nodded gravely. "I have waited 5 centuries for this moment, Princess. Yes, I will tell them everything." What followed was devastating testimony. Elder Corvesh had access to preserved Kethmori records that documented the entire biological warfare campaign. He had evidence of secret communications between Velnari military leaders, detailed records of the weapons deployment, and documentation of the Empire's deliberate cover-up. "The biological agent was not an industrial accident," he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of his words. "It was a carefully designed weapon intended to destroy our agricultural capacity without directly harming our population. The goal was to force our submission through starvation." Admiral Thekvar's face had grown increasingly pale during the testimony. These are serious accusations, but they concern events from 5 centuries ago. The current government cannot be held responsible for. "Admiral," Zara interrupted, "the current government has continued to benefit from these crimes for 500 years. The agricultural monopoly that funded our military expansion, the wealth that built our palaces, the power that sustains our empire, all built on genocide." She activated another display, showing economic data spanning centuries. "I have spent months analyzing imperial economic records. The destruction of Kethmori agricultural production led directly to a 400% increase in imperial food exports, which funded our conquest of 17 star systems. Every member of the royal family, including myself, has lived in luxury paid for by the suffering of the Kethmori people." Marcus felt a surge of pride watching Zara present her case to the galaxy. She wasn't just defending her scientific work. She was exposing centuries of injustice and demanding accountability. "The question now," she continued, "is what we do about it. I propose that the restoration of this world is only the beginning. The Velnari Empire must acknowledge what was done to the Kethmori people. We must provide reparations, and we must ensure that nothing like this ever happens again." Ambassador Reeves spoke up. "Princess, what exactly are you proposing?" Zara took a deep breath, and Marcus knew she was about to change everything forever. "I propose the creation of the Planetary Restoration Council, an independent body with representatives from every major power in the galaxy. This council would have the authority to identify worlds damaged by warfare or environmental catastrophe and oversee their restoration using the techniques we've developed here." "And the Empire's role in this council?" Admiral Thekvar asked quietly. "The Empire would provide funding, technology, and expertise as reparations for past crimes. In exchange, we would help restore any Imperial worlds that have been damaged, and we would share our restoration technology freely with the galaxy." It was a brilliant political solution, Marcus realized. Instead of punishing the Empire for past crimes, Zara was offering them a path to redemption through positive action. Dr. Kelthra was nodding enthusiastically. "The scientific benefits alone would be extraordinary. We could restore worlds that have been written off as permanently dead. We could terraform marginal worlds to support larger populations. This could solve food scarcity across dozens of systems. The economic implications are equally significant," added Ambassador Reeves. "Restored worlds would become productive assets instead of resource drains. The initial investment would pay for itself within decades. Marcus watched as momentum built around Zara's proposal. Representatives from multiple governments began discussing implementation details. Scientists started planning research collaborations, and journalists documented every moment for their audiences. Admiral Dekvar Lukid in Kriasine Uvervemit. I need to consult with the High Council. This is far beyond my authority to negotiate. Of course, Admiral, Zara said graciously. But while you're consulting, the restoration of this world continues. Every day we delay cost lives that could be saved by bringing the Kethmori home. As if summoned by her words, another screen activated showing the planet's surface. Kethmori shuttles were already landing in the restored areas, carrying families who had waited generations to return home. The cameras showed children taking their first steps on soil their great-grandparents had been forced to abandon. It's too late to stop this, Admiral, Marcus said quietly. The galaxy is watching. History is being made. The only question is whether the Empire chooses to be part of the solution or part of the problem. Admiral Thekvar stared at the screens, showing Kethmori families embracing on the restored grasslands of their ancestral world. Finally, he spoke. Princess Zarathak, I am ordering my fleet to withdraw to a safe distance while I consult with the High Council. I need to review the historical evidence you've presented. As the Imperial ships moved away from the planet, Zara collapsed into her chair with relief. The immediate crisis was over, but Marcus knew the real work was just beginning. You did it, he said softly. You turned a planetary restoration project into a galactic peace initiative. We did it, she corrected. Marcus, none of this would have been possible without you. You taught me to think like a diplomat, to see the bigger picture beyond just the science. Around them, the communication center buzzed with activity as representatives from dozens of governments began working out the details of the Planetary Restoration Council. The Barren Princess had become the architect of the most ambitious cooperative project in galactic history. That night, as they walked through the restored sections of the palace gardens, Marcus marveled at how much had changed. Where there had been only dead soil months earlier, now there were flowering plants and the sounds of returning wildlife. Do you think they'll accept your proposal? He asked. They have to, Zara replied. The alternative is being branded as genocidal oppressors by the entire galaxy. Even the Empire's enemies couldn't ignore evidence like what Elder Corvesh presented. She stopped walking and turned to face him, her hair now the soft rose gold color that meant love and contentment. Marcus, when this is all settled, I want to ask you something important. What's that? Will you marry me? Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. Zara, you know I can't give you children. I deserve someone who loves me for who I am, she interrupted. Someone who sees possibilities instead of limitations. Someone who helped me transform from a failed princess into someone who might actually change the galaxy. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device he recognized as a genetic sequencer. I've been analyzing my reproductive system for months, she said. You were right when you said my fertility had nothing to do with my intelligence. But you were wrong about one thing. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? I'm not genetically incapable of reproduction. The problem is with my brain chemistry. The stress and depression from years of rejection and exile had disrupted my hormonal balance. It's entirely treatable. Marcus stared at her in shock. You mean? I mean that falling in love, finding purpose, having hope for the future, it's literally healing me. My hormone levels have been normalizing for months. She took his hands, her eyes bright with tears and joy. I'm not the Barren Princess anymore, Marcus. I'm just Zara, a scientist who fell in love with a diplomat who believed in her when no one else would. Marcus pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed with love and amazement at this incredible woman who had refused to let others define her worth. Yes, he said. Yes, I'll marry you. But can we wait until after we finish saving the galaxy? She laughed, the sound carrying across the restored gardens where Kethmori children were playing in the moonlight. I think we can manage that schedule. As they stood together under the 3 moons of the world they had brought back to life, Marcus realized that his assignment to the Barren Princess had become so much more than either of them had ever imagined. They had found love, exposed historical injustice, revolutionized planetary science, and laid the groundwork for a new era of galactic cooperation. The galaxy had laughed at the human assigned to the failed princess. Now that same princess was reshaping interstellar politics and proving that the greatest transformations often begin with the people others have given up on. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they worked to implement the Planetary Restoration Council and navigate the complex politics of their success. But tonight, they were simply two people in love, standing in a garden that proved miracles were possible. When you refused to accept that something was broken beyond repair, the Velnari High Council's response arrived exactly 72 hours after Admiral Thekvar's withdrawal, delivered by a small, fast courier ship that appeared without fanfare. Marcus was in the laboratory with Zara, monitoring the latest bacterial deployment across the southern continent, when the message came through. "This should be interesting," Zara murmured as she activated the secure communication array. Her hair had settled into a steady silver white over the past few days, the color of determination mixed with anticipation. The holographic display activated to show Emperor Velthak himself, Zara's great-uncle and ruler of the Empire for the past 2 centuries. He looked exactly as imposing as his reputation suggested, nearly 3 meters tall, with the elaborate chitinous crown plates that marked him as the ultimate authority of his species. But Marcus noticed something unexpected in the Emperor's golden eyes: exhaustion. "Niece," the Emperor said, his voice carrying the formal harmonics of state communication. "You have created quite a situation." "Uncle," Zara replied, offering the precise bow that protocol demanded between royal family members. "I have created a solution to several problems that the Empire has ignored for far too long." A ghost of a smile flickered across the Emperor's face. Spoken like a true member of House Velnari. Direct, brilliant, and absolutely convinced of your own righteousness. He paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. "The High Council has spent the past 3 days reviewing Elder Corvesh's testimony and the historical evidence you provided. I will not lie to you, Zara. What we found in our own archives was disturbing." Marcus felt a chill. If the Emperor was admitting to wrongdoing, the evidence must have been overwhelming. "The biological warfare campaign against the Kethmori was authorized by my predecessor, Emperor Velcham, in standard year 1887. The official records describe it as a strategic agricultural intervention designed to promote regional stability. The real records, sealed in the Imperial Vault, are considerably more honest about the genocidal intent." Zara's hair shifted to deep blue, sadness mixed with vindication. "So you acknowledge that the Empire committed genocide?" she asked. "I acknowledge that the Empire systematically destroyed an entire civilization for economic gain," the Emperor replied. "I also acknowledge that every generation since has benefited from that crime, while maintaining the fiction that it was an industrial accident." He straightened, and Marcus could see the weight of imperial authority settling around him like a mantle. "Which brings us to the question of what we do about it now. Your Planetary Restoration Council proposal has been analyzed by every expert in the Empire. The consensus is that it's both politically brilliant and economically sound." And Zara asked, "And the High Council has voted to accept it with modifications?" Marcus felt a surge of excitement. They had won. The Empire was going to accept responsibility and help create the Restoration Council. "What modifications?" Zara asked cautiously. "First, the Empire will provide the equivalent of 500 billion Imperial credits over the next 50 years to fund restoration projects across the galaxy. This will be presented as reparations to the Kethmori people and any other species that can demonstrate similar historical damage." Marcus tried to wrap his mind around the scale of that commitment. 500 billion credits could restore entire star systems. Second, the Empire will transfer all territorial claims to Kepler 442b directly to the reformed Kethmori government, with you retaining honorary governorship if you choose to accept it. Zara nodded. I accept. The Kethmori should govern their own world. Third, the Emperor continued, you will serve as the first director of the Planetary Restoration Council, with full authority to oversee all restoration projects and coordinate between member governments. Zara seemed stunned by the scope of what was being offered. That's essentially creating a new branch of galactic government. Yes, it is. Which brings me to the fourth and final modification. The Emperor paused, and Marcus could see something like pride in his golden eyes. The High Council hereby formally rescinds your exile and reinstates you as heir to the imperial throne. Furthermore, we officially declare that genetic fertility has no bearing on royal succession or fitness for leadership. Marcus stared at the screen in shock. They weren't just accepting Zara's proposals. They were completely transforming the fundamental laws of the Empire. Uncle, Zara said softly, why? Because, my dear niece, you have accomplished something that none of us thought possible. You took a dead world and brought it back to life. You took a scattered, broken people and gave them their home back. You took a shameful secret and turned it into an opportunity for redemption. He gestured towards something off-screen. More importantly, you did it all while the entire galaxy was watching. Do you have any idea how many worlds have applied to join the Restoration Council already? 47. 47 worlds want our help to heal damage from natural disasters, industrial accidents, or warfare. You've turned the Empire from a symbol of conquest into a symbol of hope. Marcus watched Zara absorb this information, her hair cycling through several colors as she processed the emotional impact. There's something else, the Emperor said. Something personal. I want you to know that your grandmother would have been proud of you. Princess Keelati always said that the Empire's greatest strength was its ability to adapt and grow. She would have loved to see you prove that failure isn't an ending. It's a beginning. Tears began flowing down Zara's cheeks. Her grandmother had died during her exile, and she had been forbidden from attending the funeral. Thank you, Uncle, she whispered. Now then, the Emperor said, his tone becoming more businesslike, there are practical matters to discuss. The Council will need headquarters, staff, and a fleet of specialized ships for restoration work. I suggest we begin with the facility on Kepler 442b and expand from there. Over the next hour, they discussed the logistical details of creating an entirely new branch of galactic government. Marcus found himself taking notes on everything from personnel requirements to diplomatic protocols. The scale of what they were building was staggering. Finally, the Emperor addressed Marcus directly. Mr. Chun, the High Council has reviewed your role in these events. We understand that you were initially assigned here as a diplomatic observer, but you have become much more than that. Marcus felt a flutter of nervousness. Your Majesty, I was simply doing my duty as assigned. Your duty, Mr. Chun, was to file reports on Princess Zarathak's condition and activities. Instead, you chose to become her partner in what can only be described as the most successful diplomatic initiative in galactic history. The Emperor smiled, and Marcus realized he wasn't in trouble. The High Council would like to offer you the position of Deputy Director of the Planetary Restoration Council, with a specific responsibility for coordinating between member governments. Your diplomatic skills and your understanding of the restoration process make you uniquely qualified for this role. Marcus looked at Zara, who was beaming with pride and joy. I accept, Your Majesty, he said. After the communication ended, Marcus and Zara sat in silence for several minutes, absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened. We did it, Zara said finally. We actually did it. You did it, Marcus corrected. This was all your vision, your science, your courage. Our vision, she insisted. Marcus, I could never have navigated the political aspects of this without you. You taught me to think beyond just the science, to consider the human, the sentient element. They were interrupted by Captain Okafor's voice over the communication system. Princess Zarathak, Mr. Chun, you need to see what's happening outside. They rushed to the main observation deck and found themselves looking out over a landscape transformed beyond recognition. Where months ago there had been barren wasteland, now there were green fields stretching to the horizon. Kethmori settlements dotted the landscape, their distinctive spiral architecture rising from the restored soil. But what took their breath away was the activity in orbit. Hundreds of ships from dozens of different species filled the space around the planet. Some were bringing supplies and personnel for the expanding restoration project. Others carried delegations from governments wanting to join the council. Still others were media vessels broadcasting the ongoing transformation to audiences across the galaxy. It's like the entire galaxy has decided to have a party on our planet, Captain Okafor said with amusement. Not a party, Zara said softly. A renaissance. Over the following weeks, Kepler 442b became the center of the most intensive construction project in galactic history. The Planetary Restoration Council headquarters was built in record time, a magnificent complex that incorporated architectural elements from every member species. The facility included laboratories, conference halls, residential areas for staff, and a massive communication center that could coordinate with projects across the galaxy. Marcus found himself working 18-hour days as governments lined up to join the council and submit restoration requests. The initial 47 applications had grown to over 200, representing everything from war-damaged industrial worlds to planets suffering from natural environmental collapse. We're going to need to prioritize, he told Zara as they reviewed the latest batch of applications. We can't possibly take on 200 projects simultaneously. Actually, we can, Zara replied, showing him her latest calculations. The bacterial treatment can be mass-produced and customized for different planetary conditions. With the funding the Empire is providing, plus contributions from other governments, we could have restoration teams working on 50 worlds within 6 months. The scope of what they were creating was almost beyond comprehension. The Planetary Restoration Council was becoming the largest scientific and humanitarian project in galactic history, with the potential to restore entire star systems and relocate billions of refugees to their ancestral homes. But it wasn't just about the science and politics anymore. Marcus watched Zara work with teams of Kethmori agriculturalists, human engineers, Andromedan biochemists, and specialists from a dozen other species. She had become not just a brilliant scientist, but a true leader who could inspire people from vastly different backgrounds to work together toward common goals. You know what the most remarkable thing about all this is? Marcus said one evening as they walked through the thriving Kethmori settlement that had grown around the council headquarters. What's that? A year ago, you were the Barren princess, and I was a failed diplomat. Now you're arguably the most powerful person in the galaxy, and I'm helping coordinate the largest humanitarian project in galactic history. Zara laughed, her hair now a constant warm gold that seemed to glow in the evening light of the 3 moons. We're living proof that the galaxy's biggest mistake is giving up on people too quickly. They stopped walking and looked back at the lights of the council headquarters, where hundreds of people from across the galaxy were working around the clock to heal damaged worlds. Marcus, Zara said, taking his hand, do you remember what I told you about destiny? You said the universe has a way of putting the right people in the right place at the right time. I think we were both exactly where we needed to be when we needed to be there. You needed to learn that failure isn't the end of a story. It's the beginning of a better one. And I needed to learn that being broken doesn't mean you can't help fix the galaxy. That night, they announced their engagement to the galaxy. The response was overwhelming. Messages of congratulations poured in from hundreds of worlds, and several governments offered to host their wedding as a symbol of interspecies cooperation. But they chose to have the ceremony on Kepler 442b in the restored gardens of the palace where they had first worked together to bring life back to dead soil. Elder Corvesh performed the ceremony using ancient Kethmori rituals that blessed the union of partners who worked together to nurture life. Representatives from every major government attended, along with scientists, journalists, and ordinary citizens from across the galaxy who had been inspired by their story. The ceremony was broadcast live to over 1 billion viewers, becoming one of the most watched events in galactic history. As they exchanged vows under the light of 3 moons, Marcus looked into Zara's golden eyes and saw the reflection of their future together. They would spend their lives healing damaged worlds, reuniting displaced peoples with their homes, and proving that cooperation could accomplish what conquest never could. The Barren princess was barren no longer. She had become the mother of a new age of galactic cooperation, and her legacy would be measured not in the children she might bear, but in the world she would restore and the lives she would transform. And Marcus Chund, the failed diplomat who had once been mocked for his assignment to a forgotten princess, had found his true calling as her partner in changing the galaxy. Together, they had proven that sometimes the most extraordinary things begin with the people others have written off as failures. The galaxy would never be the same, and it would be better for the transformation they had sparked. In the end, that was a legacy worth more than any throne or diplomatic posting. They had turned their supposed failures into the foundation for a better future for everyone. 5 years had passed since the first bacterial cultures were released into the soil of Kepler 442b, and the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Planetary Restoration Council headquarters, watching the sunrise paint the landscape in shades of gold and green that would have been impossible to imagine when he first arrived on this world. Where once there had been endless expanses of barren wasteland, now there were thriving cities, productive farmlands, and forests that stretched to the horizon. The Kethmori population had grown to over 2 million as families returned from across the galaxy to reclaim their ancestral home. But more importantly, Kepler 442b had become the symbol of hope for damaged worlds everywhere. The Andromedans are ready to proceed with the atmospheric processors on Vega Prime, Zara said as she joined him on the deck, carrying a steaming cup of the hybrid coffee-tea blend that had become popular among the council staff. Her hair was now consistently the warm amber gold color that indicated deep contentment, though Marcus could see silver highlights that meant she was thinking about complex problems. That's the 15th atmospheric restoration this year, Marcus replied, accepting his own cup of the beverage. Dr. Kelthera thinks we'll have perfected the process enough to tackle the really challenging worlds by next year. They had come a long way from their first tentative experiments with soil bacteria. The Planetary Restoration Council now employed over 50,000 people across 237 member worlds. They had active projects on 86 planets, had successfully completed full restorations on 31 worlds, and had a waiting list that stretched for decades. But the scope of their success went far beyond simple environmental restoration. The Council had become a model for interspecies cooperation, demonstrating that beings from vastly different backgrounds could work together toward common goals. Wars had been prevented, refugee crises resolved, and entire species relocated to restored versions of their homeworlds. Marcus, Zara said, her voice taking on the tone she used when she was about to discuss something important, there's something I need to tell you. He turned to look at her, noting the subtle shift in her hair color to include rose gold highlights. The medical tests came back positive. We're pregnant. Marcus felt the world stop for a moment. After 5 years of marriage, they had been trying to have children for the past 2 years, but Zara's reproductive system was still recovering from decades of stress and hormonal imbalance. Are you sure? He asked, hardly daring to believe it. Dr. Miranda ran the tests 3 times to be certain, Zara said, referring to their human physician who specialized in interspecies reproductive medicine. According to her calculations, we should expect our first child in approximately 7 months. Marcus set down his cup and pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed with joy and love. Around them, the sounds of the bustling headquarters continued, scientists discussing atmospheric chemistry, engineers planning new deployment systems, diplomats coordinating with member governments. But for this moment, it felt like they were alone in the universe. I love you, he whispered into her ear. I love you too, she replied, her hair now blazing with the bright gold and silver that indicated pure happiness. They were interrupted by the chime of the priority communication system. Marcus reluctantly released Zara as the main holographic display activated to show Elder Corvesh calling from the capital city of New Kethmora. Director Zurathak, Deputy Director Chun, the elderly Kethmori, said formally, though his silver skin was practically glowing with excitement. I have news that I believe you will find most interesting. What is it, Elder? Zara asked. Our deep soil archaeologists have made a remarkable discovery. We have found the original Kethmori seed vaults, completely intact and preserved by the same geological formations that protected them from the biological weapon. Marcus felt a thrill of excitement. The Kethmori seed vaults were legendary among xenobiologists, rumored to contain genetic samples of thousands of plant species from across the galaxy that the Kethmori had collected during their golden age of agricultural innovation. The vaults contained over 40,000 different species, Elder Corvesh continued, including many that are now extinct elsewhere in the galaxy. But more importantly, they contained detailed genetic profiles and cultivation techniques for plants that could thrive in extreme environments, atmospheric extremes, soil conditions, radiation levels that we previously thought impossible for agriculture. Zara was practically vibrating with scientific excitement. Elder, this could revolutionize our restoration work. We've been limited to species that can adapt to normalized environments, but if we have access to extremophile plants, we could restore worlds that we thought were beyond help. Marcus finished. Planets with high radiation, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures. Precisely, Elder Corvesh said. The preliminary analysis suggests that we could potentially restore any world that has liquid water and basic atmosphere pressure, regardless of other environmental factors. It was a staggering possibility. There were thousands of worlds throughout the galaxy that had been written off as permanently uninhabitable due to extreme environmental conditions. If the Kethmori seed vaults contained the genetic keys to surviving in those conditions, the Council's potential impact could increase by orders of magnitude. We need to assemble a research team immediately, Zara said, already shifting into her scientific planning mode. I want our best xenobiologists, genetic engineers, and atmospheric specialists working on this. Already done, Elder Corvesh said with the slight smile that Kethmori used to express satisfaction. Dr. Kelthera is en route with a team from the University of New Geneva, and the Andromedans are sending their top specialists. We should have preliminary results within weeks. After the communication ended, Marcus and Zara stood together in comfortable silence, absorbing the magnitude of what this discovery could mean. You know what this means? Marcus said finally. That we're about to get very busy, Zara replied with a laugh. It means that your people's legacy wasn't destroyed after all. The Kethmori will be remembered not as victims of genocide, but as the species that provided the tools to heal the galaxy. Zara's hair shifted to the deep blue silver that indicated profound emotion. My people and yours, Marcus, none of this would have been possible without human ingenuity and determination. They were interrupted again, this time by Captain Okafor's voice over the internal communication system. Director, Deputy Director, you might want to come to the main conference room. We have a situation that requires your attention. When they arrived at the conference room, they found it filled with representatives from across the galaxy, all connected via holographic communication. Marcus recognized diplomats, scientists, military officials, and political leaders from dozens of different species. What's the emergency? Zara asked. Ambassador Reeves, who had become one of their strongest supporters over the years, gestured to the central display showing a star map of the Outer Rim territories. Director, we've received a request for assistance from the hegemony of Zephyr. They're facing what appears to be a deliberately engineered ecological catastrophe on 12 of their agricultural worlds. Marcus felt a chill. The hegemony of Zephyr was a collection of human colony worlds on the far edge of known space, founded by refugees from Earth's early expansion period. They had always maintained strict independence from the major galactic powers. Deliberately engineered? Zara asked. The pattern of environmental collapse is too systematic to be natural, replied Dr. Kelthra, who was participating from her laboratory on New Geneva. Something or someone is targeting their food production capabilities using what appears to be an advanced biological weapon. Marcus studied the data streaming across the displays. This looks similar to what happened to Kepler 442b, but accelerated. Whatever is causing this is working much faster than the weapon used against the Kethmori, which suggests that someone has been studying our restoration techniques and developing countermeasures, Zara said grimly. Or worse, they've been developing new weapons based on our research. The implications were terrifying. The Council's restoration techniques had been shared openly with the scientific community, as was their policy for promoting cooperation and preventing any single power from monopolizing the technology. But that openness also meant that anyone with sufficient scientific capability could potentially reverse engineer their methods to create new forms of biological warfare. Do we have any idea who might be responsible? Marcus asked. General Thraksh, the Velnari military representative on the council, activated another display showing intelligence reports from across the Outer Rim. Our analysis suggests the involvement of the Shadow Syndicate, a criminal organization that has been acquiring advanced biotechnology for unknown purposes. They have the resources and the motivation to conduct this kind of operation. Marcus had heard of the Shadow Syndicate, a loose confederation of pirates, smugglers, and terrorists who operated in the lawless regions beyond the major galactic powers. They were known for their sophisticated technology and their complete lack of moral restraints. What would they gain by destroying agricultural worlds? Zara asked. Control, Ambassador Reeves said grimly. If they can destroy food production and then offer to sell the antidote, they could effectively hold entire populations hostage. It's the ultimate extortion scheme. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the horrific elegance of the plan. The Shadow Syndicate could potentially starve entire star systems into submission. We have to help them, Zara said finally. The hegemony of Zephyr may be independent, but there's still 12 worlds full of innocent people who don't deserve to suffer because criminals have perverted our restoration technology. The logistics will be challenging, Marcus pointed out. The Outer Rim is weeks away, even by fast ship, and we don't know how much time we have before the ecological collapse becomes irreversible. Then, we don't send a ship, Zara said, her hair shifting to the silver white of determined problem-solving. We send a fleet, the largest restoration mission in the Council's history. Over the next several hours, they planned what would become known as the Zephyr Emergency Response. It was a massive undertaking that would require coordinating resources from over 100 worlds, assembling a fleet of restoration ships, and developing new techniques for rapid deployment of countermeasures. But as Marcus watched the representatives of dozens of species working together to plan the mission, he realized that this crisis represented something more than just another restoration project. It was proof that the Council had succeeded in creating something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly cooperative civilization that would rush to help strangers simply because it was the right thing to do. You know what I'm thinking? Zara said as they took a brief break from the planning session. That we're about to undertake the most complex restoration mission in galactic history while you're pregnant, and we've just discovered genetic materials that could revolutionize our entire field. I'm thinking that our child is going to grow up in a galaxy where species work together instead of fighting each other, where problems are solved